Hello and welcome back. We are the ladies of Asteri, Sofia, Kairos, and with us we have Shauna Smart Astro, Krista from Practical Astros, and Mandy Ray of Ecstatic Astrology. And we're going to take you through the week of the 11th to the 18th of December. And if you're enjoying this, please remember to support us with likes and subscribes. And we welcome your comments and your questions. Shauna, do you want to take us through the astrology of the week that we're going to be looking at?
Yeah, sure. So I have to just say, though, the introductions, it makes me laugh a little bit because you're like Shauna Smart Astro. And not intentionally, of course, I don't think. But, Shauna Smart Ass, it works. All right. So we're doing the
Really?
11th through the 18th. We're setting the 11th through the 18th. Sorry.
You'll teach me.
Let's edit. We'll edit. It's fine.
Shauna Smart.
You're a smart ass. Just okay. Smart ass. Sure.
Oh, smart ass.
No. All right. So we've got the 11th through the 18th of December. We have enough going on in December. My gosh. This week, thankfully, not as full as what Mandy's already talked about and what Sonia has already talked about, but we've still got plenty to come. So on the 12th, we've got Venus opposite Mars. Aquarius and Leo axis, 5 degrees. And the 13th, we've got Mercury in a sextile, Mercury retrograde in a sextile to Venus. And the 15th, we've got a full moon in Gemini. That should be fun. 23 degrees. We have on the 15th as well, Mercury is going to station direct at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. We'll make our way toward another Cazimi then. And then on the 18th, we've got Sun square Neptune at 27 degrees of Sag. I kind of love that. We've talked a little bit already about the exaltation degree of Venus. It's kind of fun. I think she's definitely got her flavor in that one. All right, we can take a look at the 12th when we've got the Venus opposite Mars. All right. Does anyone have any crazy thoughts about this one just yet?
As a date, it's the day that the Virgin de Guadalupe revealed herself to children. And I love this date just for that. I always think of just the divine feminine kind of revealing divine images to receptive minds. So I've always loved this date just for that alone. So maybe that it'll be that Mars Venus opposition. Maybe it'll be some of that. Bring in some of that vibe in.
I think they're handing off messages because Venus can join Pluto and then opposes Mars, and then Mars is like, okay, well, I'll face off with him. That's what it feels like. I don't know if it's as warlike as that, but whenever I think of Mars opposite Pluto, I think of, kind of war vibes, and I can't help it. But Venus conjoining Pluto and then opposing Mars in between those two things still significant. So I like that.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like Venus is picking up weapons from Pluto, right? And getting ready for battle. Hopefully not crazy battle, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely a foreshadowing of the Mars-Pluto opposition, I think.
Yeah, because they're both bringing passion, aren't they? Venus brings passion for people and beauty, and Mars brings passion for action. So where there's a tension in that opposition, and it's in fixed signs as well, so it's more lasting as well, that tension and that balance. And like you say, just coming forward from Pluto feels like she's bringing something forward of that.
Yeah, the moon in Taurus, and it's like, why not just make the T-square? Because, just a few hours before that, it will exactly T-square the Venus-Mars opposition. So it's mutable. People are definitely under pressure, but I think fixed people will begin to see this materialize probably around the 12th.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I wrote down, I've been reading this book. I don't know if you guys know it at all. Of course, I have to bring a book out, right? Venus and Mars. Who wrote it? Michelle Finney. I don't know how to say her name. I'm butchering it probably. But in one of the chapters, she's talking about fixed feuds. And I really kind of thought that was a clever play on words there for this one. Polarity of desire, Sonia, you kind of just touched on that heavy passion, that draw back and forth, that push-pull. It also, there's a tension maybe between logic and emotion with this one too. Maybe in personal relationships, it could be how do you ask for some space to move about as yourself within a partnership, even chemistry and conflict. The other thing I read on this was really cool, that Mars represents the metal of iron, right? And Venus is copper. And both of them can create magnets on their own, but they're much stronger and more focused when you put those metals together. So I just thought that was a really cool, like, tangible idea, to represent this Venus-Mars opposition, like chemistry and conflict, but creativity, even like Venus, I think in Aquarius kind of aims for some of that creativity too. And when we've been bouncing around in November, December with Neptune sitting on that exaltation degree, it just feels like there's so much Venus influence there. And how can we like have flair, but also make it like practical, in a way.
She's also getting that style from Mercury too. So it's like she is getting a little bit of assistance.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think too, with Mars being retrograde in Leo, that's more of a question or a redo, and it's what do I really want? And Venus is like, have you looked at this? Have you looked at the big picture? Maybe this is what you should be looking at. So I think that there's that nice interplay with, what do I want? Well, that's one place to look is Aquarius for what you do want, I think.
Yeah. And actually, that's a great point. Like Mars being in Leo, that's definitely that more focused individual kind of a light, where Venus is sitting in Aquarius, which is definitely a more all-encompassing collective kind of a feeling. Definitely. I was thinking about some questions, even like self-reflection kind of questions. One of them that came up is individuality or passion being prioritized? I think that would be kind of something really cool that most people could ask themselves right now. Another would be, how can you manage differing needs that balance both freedom and individuality? Again, there's that Leo Aquarius kind of dichotomy with that one. And then lastly, I was thinking about how we can channel the tension into those creative outlets and also incorporate collaboration within that too.
Yeah. And I love that you brought in the elements of copper and iron, because, you can put a copper pot on the stove and heat it up and like make food. You can make nourishment, you can make poisons, you can make anything. It's like combining those two together, you have that cup, that chalice, that capacity for creativity. So it's like, what do you choose to use that tension? I don't dislike the Venus Mars opposite each other, because they rule opposing houses anyway. Like they're used to kind of being far away from each other, and in a way it can kind of seem like a dance, like seeing somebody at a party and just like making eyes way across the room, but there's definitely a connection there, and kind of having that tension even through the distance.
Yeah, it feels like we're talking about that kind of alchemy, but that's what happens in a relationship, isn't it? There's either chemistry or there isn't. And you either create something that's more than the sum of the two separate parts, and that is the alchemy, isn't it? Do you create something that's greater than that and support each other and create a third thing, which is the relationship? Or do you pull each other down?
Yeah, and just making that connection within the houses of your own nativity. Like this is 4th and 10th for me. So I think, how do I use the tension between home and public life? How do I weave those together? What's the tension between those two? If this was 3rd and 9th, it's like your kind of just your practice and your praxis of spiritual exploration, or if it's your 2nd and 8th, like skills and shared resources, like how is that tension really playing out? Just like the Mercury Jupiter opposition has been happening for a while, and weaving those houses together through that opposition, we also get it at the same time with this Venus and Mars, but it's just new and it won't last for that long. That Mandy's right, that Pluto is definitely going to play a part in it, like 2 weeks later as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I have some dates. The conjunction was the 22nd of February in 2024, and that was at 6 degrees of Aquarius, which is just a degree later than where they are now. And the next conjunction will be the 8th of January, 26th. So that's a way off a year, and that will be at 18 Capricorn.
Well, I remember last year, there was the Venus retrograde the year prior, and she was so slow, and they had that, what was that word?
Reformation.
She almost caught up with them and then slowed down, and they finally met up like on Valentine's Day or that week of this year. Remember, it was like this long built up tension, and then they met up in Aquarius. And so, this now we're kind of speaking to that same Aquarius house, but involving that tension point from the Leo side of things too. So I don't know, it's kind of,
yeah, it's kind of cute to see their cycles, isn't it? The way they meet and cute
planets.
relation where they get so close, and then within that engagement, those degrees of engagement, but then one of them retrogrades and they never quite connect, which is like the best love stories ever, isn't it?
It is. It really is. You know, even to add to this, Black Moon Lilith which is the slowest point of the moon, is in Scorpio opposite the moon during this and square. So, I mean, I think the lunar aspect of this is pretty cool because Venus is the ruler of the moon during this, so it's like we're getting more. And then Mars is the ruler of the slowest point of the moon at this point. So I just thought that was pretty cool.
Yes, I like that. I don't follow the Black Moon Lilith, but that sounds fascinating.
It just really adds to that tension too.
It does. I don't work with it a lot, but I do work with it in the sense that it's knowing it's the slowest point of the moon. I think in a lunar way, just that means there's a focal point there, right? The moon's going to be moving slower through that area. So that means the opposite area where the moon is during this opposition, the moon's moving pretty fast, so it's not going to even spend a whole lot of time in Venus's domain, and that's kind of sad, but it is giving cues to emotionally pay attention to Venus, whereas, but I guess the slower thing is Black Moon Lilith, and it's giving cues to the very slow Mars. So it's a very
moon is growing too. It's like she's fast because she's gaining more and more light.
Yep. Pretty cool.
All right. Well, I think that might wrap up Mars Venus. Awesome. We can go on then. We've got this full moon happening on the 15th. I think there's a lot to say about it, which seems fitting for Gemini, right? Does anyone want to jump in with anything just yet?
What does the phrase say? Time to what? Can't read it.
Decide.
Right.
Force. Gemini.
I mean, those, they represent culmination and clarity. It's the peak of the lunar cycle. Yeah, Sonia, do you want to talk to the card that you have here, the time to decide, Gemini 3?
Of course, we've got those keywords of do or die, sacrifice, and necessity of choice. And the butterfly is like reminding us that we face a decision, which is like quite fitting for like a full moon that's illuminating what those decisions might be. And then it's reminding us that when we decide yes, we're also saying no to other things. So we might face multiple options and we've got to decide on one. And it's a point where it's no longer possible to juggle competing opportunities. Even it might create anxiety to choose, but it's reminding us that we've now got to make that decision and discard those other options, which might be no longer becoming viable. And it's offering us the judgment in the way that the full moon is lighting it up and saying, okay, it might be difficult, but the time is now to move forward and thrive with whatever path you choose. So wherever the butterfly decides to land, it's got all those choices of places where it can land, but it's got to choose one. So that's what it's offering us. And Kira Ryberg, astrologer, gives us decisiveness for Gemini 3. And Austin Coppock is a little bit darker. He calls it the executioner's blade, which is really that sense of cutting off of other options. I feel if you look at that, like it's the finality of, okay, that has gone, that has been, we're cutting that out of our lives. So it's really a sense of you've outgrown this, it has to go, is the way I see it. But Austin does bring a lot of blood into the visions that he evokes. And there's a lot of Saturn in Austin's chart, and it does show through in his imagery. But the decan is ruled by Saturn and the Sun. So in the way that we were talking in the previous week about Saturn and Sun and when they connect, and that there is darkness there. Saturn is the greater malefic, and the Sun can be life-giving, but when the Sun is connected with a malefic, it will, depending on the Sun's placement, it can also be malefic, depending on how it's aspected. And in connection with Saturn, it can turn to that darkness. And it is that thing of, if you want to move forward, sometimes there comes that point where a decision has to be made, and sometimes you're in a limbo until you make that decision. And Gemini particularly can be all the choices, all the books, all the options. And looking into all of those. But when you come to the end of Gemini, it's like, okay, if you want to move forward now, you've got to choose one. And that is particularly hard for a Gemini to do. Is that making sense to you, Sean?
Yeah, I feel like there was a little bit of a direct arrow there with the book. I'm kidding.
Sorry.
No. You're not wrong.
I think it's the tarot cards associated where the sun is and when it is, because that last decan of Gemini, those last 10 degrees of Gemini, when you think about it in the northern hemisphere, it's the culmination of getting up to the summer solstice. So the sun is like rising high, and it can feel like a functional malefic when the sun is rising too high. But the tarot card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the character on the ground, and he has 10 swords just piercing his back, like one straight in his head, right? And Emily Letzel of Emily said this phrase that I just will forever remember. She's like, the swords finally found a place to land. And it's like, there is this finality of like, here is where I stake my ground. But then on the other hand, where the sun is in the last decan, Sagittarius, it's a Saturn ruled decan and Jupiter sign, and the sun is really going to the darkest point. You know, it's about to crest over like a week later into Capricorn. It will begin its ascent. It's a cardinal sign where the sun really changes story, but it's like the darkest point for the sun at this time. And the card associated with that is the 10 of Wands, where it's this guy carrying 10 wands in a really awkward way, holding him right in front of, he can't even see where he's going. So it's like this exhaustion, the sense of big finality, and the sun kind of reflecting that on the moon while it's in that decan. I don't know, it just feels like, it feels very tense. And knowing that I get the sense that this full moon will be very tense, and then with that tension comes release. Just like people that skydive and do like real high adrenaline sports, they have real big highs and then they have real big lows because that tension is so big, and then they fall. So it feels like a pretty potent full moon. It'll be, it may be exhausting for people that celebrate traditional holidays in December, but I think after that, if we can kind of ride that wave down after that, the week going into Christmas from here will feel easier, just because we'll have, kind of popped that pimple, burst that bubble of all that tension that is being created within those. And I think about this too, tarot cards especially, of like, the journey is almost over, like just a few more steps and then you'll get to that point, and then there will be true release,
Yeah, Kira Ryberg actually says in her book, 36 Faces, I think is the title of hers, things can only go up from here. She has that in quotations. And because you know what rock bottom looks like, it's like the light at the end of the tunnel that wills you to keep moving forward, which goes right along with what you're saying. I completely agree.
Like the darkest hours just before the dawn. That's what I think about with that Sag.
I was going to add in what Susan Chang says, but kill the twin doesn't really leave a bright side, does it?
Well, it's funny because Kira actually touches on that in hers about how many different ways this decan of Gemini is interpreted. And because I think even someone says it's mocking and laughing, so it's like there's so many different ways you can look at it. But I think ultimately what I'm getting is the square to Neptune pretty hardcore, and Neptune being direct at this point, it's like the turning of a wheel, and Neptune's a malefic. Neptune's a malefic. Okay, I have to say it. It is a malefic. It can feel that way. So this square almost like indicates the conjunction's coming. This is that turning moment where the sun, it'll be later on, the sun will square Neptune, but this full moon really lights that up for me.
Tanya, we can probably move on to the sun square Neptune. All right. Mandy, you started us off. It's awesome.
Yeah. And it felt right because, the moon right after that exact full moon moment squares it. And I know they're pretty far apart days-wise, but I think they sit the applying aspects, and me and Krista have talked about this. The applying aspects are the ones that I feel the hardest, the most. And when I say hard, I don't necessarily mean it will be hard. Though, this square to Neptune, it's loud. Yeah. So that same day, Mercury goes direct, right, of the full moon that we just had. Yeah. So at least, I guess there's at least that. Mercury will be direct
Yeah, it's that release on top of release.
Yeah. Because Neptune can be release and letting go and just, finally saying, okay, surrender.
Yes, what Neptune invites us to do, isn't it? That's the only way to work with Neptune, isn't it? To surrender. If you're in the fog, put your lights on and try and navigate your way through.
Yep. Slowly. And a Sag sun doesn't like to do that, especially when does Jupiter go direct?
February. Yeah, February 4th, I think.
Yeah. So, you're right. So with Jupiter just being probably pretty slow, it went retrograde at 21. It'll go direct at 11.
Yeah.
So it's at 14. Yeah. It's only going to move 3 degrees from there. So it is kind of like slowly and surely, I think. The sun in Sag is not getting its way on this day, I don't think, as far as quick movement goes. Maybe the next day when the moon trines it, but.
And there's that sweet trine from Venus, though.
To Jupiter. It does feel like a day you might want to just be in your magical space, letting the voices talk, so to speak. Just let them talk.
Oh, no.
Speaking of voices talking, to double back to one thing you said from last week, Mandy, was my notes have, I broke down spiritual tension. So like, where are you wanting to find that reverence or that devotion? And how can you maybe refine it, narrow down what your beliefs, do your ideals align with who you are now versus who you were then? I feel like even, Neptune, if Neptune's a malefic, then it's gonna instigate that, and it's gonna, this explains so much, Mandy, because I have Mercury opposite Neptune, so 12th and 6th right there.
I'm telling you, it is a thing. I do appreciate this heightened spiritual vibes that Neptune brings. I can't say that it's all bad, but I think that it gets bad when you escape negatively or allow yourself to be in that space of just nothing matters, rather than the reverence, the devotion part of it. And I just did a live yesterday on addiction in the chart, and Neptune shows up all the time, and that's Neptune, So
like the fairyland, like if you accept food from the fairies and you go off into the fairyland, like ultimately for you as the character in your human life, that is a malefic, but it might feel, because you've not only surrendered, but you surrendered agency. And there's a difference in surrendering fully and that Neptune. I think all the outers can be a functional malefic or a functional benefic.
Very true.
But Neptune is just so hard to pin down. So you don't know. It's like, are you helping me or hurting me? It's just hard to know.
It's the nature of it. Yeah, it's hard to know. It disguises itself. And a lot. And so, I think on this day and the full moon, maybe there's things that come to light. I think that can be a way you look at sun, especially the closing square to Neptune, is secrets revealed or truth that comes out, maybe even. Mercury is trying the moon and Mars, so we don't want to hear, but yeah.
This cycle for them, the synodic cycle, started on the 17th of March, 2024, and that started at 27 Pisces.
I think with so much Venusian flavor too, there's that potential for overindulgence. And Venus and Neptune can't see each other as they are during this aspect. And I think that can lead to a dangerous tipping point if you're not careful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I always say check on your people during Neptune moments, big Neptune moments. Just, try to support and be there for people and reach out if you're the person who needs that support during moments like these, because escapism can be a lot of different ways, a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I say much the same, and trust what you're hearing from other people if you've got a Neptune transit going on. If you're hearing the same thing from people that you trust in your life, but you yourself are confused or you don't know which way is forward, you can trust those people in your lives that are telling you the same thing.
Especially with Venus trying Jupiter. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a square, the whole sign square from Neptune to the ruler Jupiter that's retrograde. So it's not offering a lot of help from Gemini, but the information it's giving might not be correct. So the information that's coming in to Neptune from its ruler isn't great, and then it's got an aversion to Venus.
It reminds me of the Picatrix. When you read the introduction of the Picatrix, it basically says like half of the information in this book is lies, and it's up to you to figure it out. So be careful doing the magic, because you might be doing, magic that won't work or is harmful. Like, it's up to you to use this information, integrate it, and then discover what is the real magic. And I love that. Bob Dylan also just seems like a character. Like, he had that documentary that came out, and half of the stories were just made up. But it's like, it was still entertaining. You still got a laugh out of it. It's like, wait, Sharon Stone dated the guy from Kiss, and like he used his makeup, and that's why he did that Rolling Thunder tour with all the white. Like, what is going on? Like, you kind of get lost in that Neptunian story, but you do have to come out of it. So then you have fun in the adventure, but really, you'll have to work really hard for truth.
And that's where finding your anchor, finding your empty countertop really matters. You can find that place. That's going to be so important.
For me, it's my friends' houses. So look for texts from me on that Wednesday. Can you tell me what's going on in my life?
Yeah. Yeah, because people, usually have, it is that my friends say that it's like looking through a window. It's very easy to judge other people's lives. But we say that you're only looking through a window. You don't know the whole context of it. So sometimes you can give an opinion, but it's not based on the full fact. So sometimes it's not a great opinion, but sometimes it is, because you get that bird's eye view of this isn't right, this isn't good, this isn't healthy. And if you've got an authentic relationship with your friends, you will give that advice straight, and just be honest, support where it's great to support, and just give that feedback. But I don't think this is good for you. This isn't authentic to you. This isn't who you are. And when something doesn't feel right. Their next conjunction will be the 19th of March, 2025 at 29 Pisces. So,
and March is going to be a hell of an episode to record.
Yes.
Might as well just start now.
Let's take a lunch break and then just start with March.
Yeah. It's kind of like the whole of 2025 happens in March.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good to say that this will connect into this specific date. So yeah.
Yeah, because that's another 29 and erratic degree, but popping up. It's like there's got to be a story there, hasn't there, with all these outers and everything making their new conjunctions in 2025 at 29 degrees. Hey, was that everything we had there?
Yeah, I think we wrapped up Neptune square Sun.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was your December weekly Astro update. And next week, we'll be back with you for the astrology of the 18th to the 25th. Thank you to Shauna for leading us through. Do you want to say it, Shauna?
Smart Astro.
Thank you. And Krista from Practical Astros, Janessa from By Jove Astrology, and Mandy Ray from Static Astrology. And we are the ladies of Asteri, Sofia, Kairos. Please do like and subscribe, and we welcome your comments and your questions. Thank you so much.